Lucas had always loved dusty old bookstores, the kind hidden in forgotten alleys, where bookshelves stretched endlessly and smelled like history itself. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, he stumbled upon one he'd never seen before. A simple wooden sign reading, "Time-worn treasures," hung crookily above the door. Curiosity tugging at his feet, Lucas pushed the creaking door open and was immediately greeted by the scent of leather-bound tomes and aged parchment. Rows of books leaned precariously, as if waiting to share long-forgotten secrets. At the far end of the store stood a tall, grey-haired man with spectacles perched low on his nose. He gave Lucas a polite nod before returning to his book. Wandering through the aisles, Lucas ran his fingers along the spines of countless books until one, tucked between two massive volumes, caught his attention. Its cover was plain but worn, with faint golden letters barely visible under layers of dust. Time Traveler's Journal. He pulled it free, surprised by its unexpected weight. The pages crackled softly as he flipped them open. Strange symbols and indecipherable writing filled the margins, while faint sketches of clockwork gears decorated the corners. As he turned to the first blank page, something remarkable happened. A faint glow shimmered along the edges of the diary, growing brighter until the entire room seemed to pulse with golden light. The air buzzed with energy, and Lucas felt as though he were being lifted off the floor. "What the—" he muttered, trying to let go of the book. But his fingers wouldn't move. The diary had anchored itself to his hands, binding them with invisible threads of light. Suddenly, the room around him began to blur. The bookshelves, the grey-haired man, the wooden floor all faded into a swirling vortex of light and sound. Lucas felt weightless, like a leaf caught in the wind, spinning faster and faster until silence. When his feet finally touched solid ground, Lucas realized he was no longer in the bookstore. In fact, he wasn't even in the present anymore. Lucas blinked rapidly, trying to steady himself. The golden light faded, revealing a vast, open landscape. Green fields stretched out under a pale blue sky dotted with fluffy clouds. In the distance, a small village stood nestled by a thick forest, its thatched roof cottages clustered like a storybook illustration. "Where am I?" Lucas whispered to himself, still clutching the strange diary. The unmistakable clanking of metal drew his attention. Turning around, he spotted a group of men in chainmail armor marching along a dirt path. Their faces were stern, their swords gleaming in the afternoon sun. Lucas's heart raced. This can't be real. I must have hit my head or something, he thought, though the warm breeze and earthy scent told him otherwise. "Hey, you there?" One of the soldiers barked, his voice gruff. "What are you doing out here alone, dressed like that?" Lucas glanced down at his jeans and sneakers. Yeah, he definitely didn't fit in. Thinking fast, he stammered, I'm just a traveler. Lost my way." The soldier narrowed his eyes but seemed to accept the answer. "Be careful, lad. Raiders have been spotted near the woods. Best you head to the village for safety." Thanks," Lucas said awkwardly, making his way toward the cottages. His mind spun with questions. How had he ended up here? And more importantly, how was he supposed to get back? As he approached the village, the air filled with the sounds of daily life, children laughing, blacksmith hammers ringing, and merchants shouting about fresh bread and salted meats. The village bustled with energy, but there was an undercurrent of unease. People whispered nervously, glancing toward the forest. Lucas spotted an elderly woman sitting by a well, her hands trembling as she twisted a worn piece of fabric. "Excuse me," he said gently. "What's going on? Is something wrong?" Her eyes, clouded with age but sharp with fear, met his. "The raiders," she murmured. "They come in the night, stealing food, burning homes. We are helpless without more soldiers." A sudden determination gripped Lucas. He had no idea how long he'd be stuck here, but he couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Maybe this was why the diary had brought him here, to help in some way. "Is there anything I can do to help?" he asked. The woman looked at him skeptically. "A stranger like you. What can you do?" Lucas opened the diary in his hands, hoping for a clue. To his surprise, glowing symbols appeared on the page, forming words he could read. "Seek the blacksmith. Forge a plan." Taking a deep breath, Lucas nodded. "I think I know where to start." With renewed purpose, he headed toward the forge, where sparks flew like stars against the fading sky. Lucas barely had time to catch his breath before the world around him dissolved into shimmering light once again. The ground shifted beneath his feet, and the familiar dizziness returned. When the swirling colors finally faded, he stood on a cobblestone street bathed in warm golden light. Elegant buildings with arched windows and red-tiled roofs lined the street. Vibrant market stalls displayed fruits, fabrics, and handmade trinkets. The air was filled with the melody of lutes and the chatter of merchants bargaining passionately in Italian. "Firenze?" Lucas whispered, recognizing the iconic domes and towers in the distance. "Am I in Florence during the Renaissance?" As if to confirm his suspicion, a man in a long tunic and leather sandals rushed past, nearly knocking Lucas over. "Perdonami," the man called without stopping. Lucas shook his head in disbelief. Looking down at the diary still clutched in his hand, Lucas saw glowing words forming on the page. "Find the painter. Time is your canvas." A painter? That didn't narrow it down much in Florence. Artists were everywhere, and this was the golden age of creativity. Still, Lucas felt an inexplicable pull guiding him through the winding streets, until he reached a modest workshop. Inside, the scent of fresh paint mingled with sawdust. Canvases leaned against every wall, depicting ethereal figures, lush landscapes, and intricate geometric patterns. In the center of the room stood a man with wild curls and a paintbrush tucked behind his ear. His hands were stained with a rainbow of colors. "Ah, you're here," the painter exclaimed as if he'd been expecting Lucas. "You must be the apprentice sent by destiny." "Ah, sure," Lucas replied, deciding it was best not to argue with fate. The painter gestured toward an unfinished canvas. "I'm working on a commission for the Duke, but the colors, mamma mia, they aren't right. I need lapis lazuli for the perfect blue, but the merchant refuses to sell it without payment up front. And I'm, let's say, financially challenged." Lucas frowned, trying to think. Lapis lazuli, he remembered from history class, was a rare and expensive pigment imported from distant lands. "Maybe I can help," he offered. The painter's eyes sparkled with hope. "If you do, you'll forever be part of a masterpiece." Lucas flipped open the diary, hoping for guidance. Once again, glowing words appeared. "Trade knowledge for color." An idea struck him. Turning to the painter, he said, "What if I teach the merchant something valuable in exchange for the pigment?" The painter laughed. "You're bold, apprentice. Very well, let's see if your wits can outshine your brushwork." As Lucas walked toward the bustling market, he realized that this challenge wasn't just about art. It was about creativity, problem-solving, and communication. The lessons here would shape his journey in more ways than he could imagine. The world spun violently once again, a vortex of lights and shapes pulling Lucas forward until he landed hard on a cold, unforgiving surface. The air was thick with smoke, the pungent smell of burning coal filling his lungs. Coughing, Lucas scrambled to his feet, blinking through the haze. Towering chimneys loomed above, belching dark clouds into a grey sky. Massive machines clanked and hissed, their gears grinding relentlessly as steam hissed from every joint. Workers in soot-covered clothes rushed around, shouting orders over the deafening noise. Lucas realized he was standing in the middle of a factory floor, the heart of the Industrial Revolution. "Watch it, kid," a gruff voice barked. A man in a grease-stained apron yanked Lucas out of the way just as a cart piled high with metal parts rumbled past. "You trying to get yourself killed?" "Sorry," Lucas stammered, still trying to process his new surroundings. The diary in his hand vibrated subtly, its pages glowing faintly. Lucas opened it to find another cryptic message. "Find the problem before the clock stops." A loud, jarring screech echoed through the factory, halting all movement. Sparks flew from one of the largest machines, which had suddenly ground to a halt. Workers gathered anxiously around it, their faces filled with dread. "We can't afford this," one man shouted. "If production stops, we lose the contract." Lucas felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He didn't know much about industrial machinery, but something told him this was his task to solve. He approached the machine cautiously, inspecting the intricate gears and belts. "What's wrong with it?" he asked a nearby worker. "Gear's jammed," the worker grumbled. "No one here knows how to fix it, and the foreman ain't coming back till tomorrow." Lucas flipped open the diary again, hoping for guidance. This time, a simple diagram appeared, highlighting the exact part causing the malfunction. Lucas studied it carefully before looking back at the machine. "I think I can fix it," he said confidently. The workers exchanged skeptical glances, but desperation won out. "Be my guest," the gruff man said, crossing his arms. Lucas reached into the machine, carefully adjusting the faulty gear as the diagram had shown. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but after a few tense minutes, the gear clicked back into place. "Try it now," Lucas urged. The worker hesitated, then pulled the lever. The machine roared back to life, its gears turning smoothly once more. Cheers erupted from the workers, who clapped Lucas on the back. "You're a genius, kid." One of them laughed. Lucas smiled, relief washing over him. The diary glowed brighter, signaling that his task here was complete. As the world began to blur and shift again, Lucas thought, "Maybe I'm starting to get the hang of this." Lucas landed with a jolt, the world stabilizing into familiar shapes and colors. He blinked, his eyes adjusting to soft afternoon light filtering through dusty windows. He was back in time-worn treasures, the same creaky bookstore where his journey had begun. The grey-haired bookseller stood at the counter, calmly flipping through a thick tome as if nothing extraordinary had happened. "Ah, you're back," the man said without looking up. Lucas staggered forward, still catching his breath. "What just happened?" he asked. "I traveled through time, medieval villages, the Renaissance, factories. It all felt real." The bookseller gave a knowing smile. "Reality is a curious thing, isn't it? Sometimes the lessons we need most are hidden in the strangest places." Lucas glanced down at the diary still clutched in his hand. Its cover no longer glowed, but the pages felt warmer, as though they carried the weight of countless adventures. Flipping it open, he noticed something peculiar. The once indecipherable symbols had rearranged themselves into a coherent message. The past holds clues to unlock the future, but only when seen through eyes willing to learn. A chill ran down Lucas's spine. The people he'd met, the challenges he'd faced, they hadn't just been random events. Each journey had offered a vital piece of knowledge waiting to be pieced together. He recalled the raiders threatening the medieval village, the artist's struggle to capture the perfect hue, the chaos of the broken factory machine. In every moment, Lucas had been forced to think differently, adapt, and communicate across barriers of time, language, and culture. The diary's glow returned, faint but steady. Another message formed on the page. The key is hidden where all stories begin. Lucas's brow furrowed. Where all stories begin? The first page? He flicked back to the beginning of the diary. To his astonishment, the blank page where his journey had started now revealed a detailed map. Not of distant lands, but of the very bookstore he stood in. A small X marked a spot near the back corner. Heart racing, Lucas followed the map, weaving through shelves until he reached the designated spot. Tucked between two dusty books was a small, intricately carved wooden box. He lifted it carefully and returned to the counter. "What's this?" The bookseller's eyes gleamed. "Why don't you open it and find out?" Lucas hesitated before unlatching the box. Inside lay a single beautifully crafted key made of shimmering metal that seemed both ancient and futuristic. "What does it unlock?" Lucas asked. The bookseller's smile widened. "That, my young traveler, is up to you to discover. Every journey begins with curiosity, and yours is far from over." Lucas felt a surge of excitement and possibility. The key was more than just a physical object. It was a symbol of everything he'd learned. He realized that the lessons from his travels weren't just about history, but about creativity, problem-solving, and adaptability. As he walked toward the door, diary and key in hand, Lucas turned back one last time. "Thank you," he said sincerely. The bookseller nodded. "Safe travels, Lucas." Stepping out into the bustling street, Lucas knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning of his story.